Alien Queen asked his daughter to choose a new father from 5 emperors. She chose the human janitor. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The crystalline spires of Nexera Prime glittered in the light of 3 suns, a testament to the architectural mastery of the Galactic Confederation's most powerful species. Inside the tallest tower, Princess Lyra stood before her mother, Queen Selene, her violet eyes downcast as she listened to the news that would change her life forever. Kyle Barrett had just finished mopping the western corridor of the royal palace when the commotion began. An ordinary human janitor in an extraordinary alien world, he adjusted his uniform and pushed his cleaning cart aside, trying to make himself invisible as royal guards rushed past. Just another day as the only human employed in the heart of the most powerful civilization in the known galaxy. The selection ceremony will begin in 3 cycles, announced the royal herald, his voice echoing through the cavernous halls where Kyle worked. All eligible emperors must present themselves to the Grand Council. Kyle paused his work, careful not to attract attention. Selection ceremony? He had heard whispers among the staff, but had dismissed them as palace gossip. As the newest and lowest-ranking maintenance worker, he rarely received accurate information. Humans were still considered a novelty in the Confederation, tolerated but hardly respected. Queen Selene of the Nexarian Empire stood on her balcony overlooking the capital city, her iridescent skin catching the light as she addressed her daughter. Though the queen appeared calm to her subjects, Princess Lyra could sense her mother's unease. The death of the king 6 months ago had left a void in the leadership of their empire, a void that tradition demanded be filled. "My daughter," said Queen Selene, her voice gentle yet firm, "you understand what is required of you." Princess Lyra nodded, though her heart beat rapidly in her chest. "I am to choose a new father from among the 5 emperors who have presented themselves as candidates. Not just a father for you," Queen Selene corrected, "but a king for our people and a strategic ally for our empire. The one you choose will shape the future of Nexera for generations to come." The weight of responsibility pressed down on Lyra's shoulders. At merely 73 cycles, barely an adult by Nexarian standards, she was tasked with a decision that would affect billions. The princess straightened her posture, her 4-fingered hands clasped tightly before her. "I understand my duty, mother. I will choose wisely." Queen Selene touched her daughter's face with a maternal tenderness rarely displayed in public. "I know you will. The ceremonies begin tomorrow. You will have 5 days to interact with each candidate before making your final selection." Meanwhile, in the service corridors below, Kyle wiped sweat from his brow as he finished his shift. 3 years on this alien world, and he still hadn't fully acclimated to its higher gravity and warmer temperatures. He had come to Nexera Prime seeking adventure and a fresh start after a failed business venture on Earth. The human diaspora following first contact had scattered his species across dozens of worlds, but few had penetrated as deeply into the aristocratic Nexarian society as he had, even if only as a maintenance worker. Barrett, called Supervisor Thrix, his gelatinous form quivering with what Kyle had learned to recognize as irritation. "You're assigned to the Royal Reception Hall tomorrow. Extra duties for the ceremony." Kyle suppressed a groan. Extra duties meant longer hours, but no additional pay. "Yes, sir. What time should I report?" "First light. And make sure you're properly groomed. The 5 emperors will be present, and no one wants to see a disheveled human." "Understood." Kyle nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the slight. After Thrix departed, Kyle allowed himself a small smile. The royal reception hall meant he would actually witness the famous emperors in person, something few humans could claim. As the triple sun set over the horizon, casting the palace in a golden-purple glow, Kyle made his way to the staff quarters. His room was small but private, a luxury granted to him not out of respect, but because most Nexarians preferred not to share living space with humans. Their loss, Kyle thought, as he activated his communication device to call his sister back on Earth. "Hey, Emma," he said when his sister's face appeared on the screen. You won't believe what's happening tomorrow. Emma's eyes widened as Kyle explained the selection ceremony. So the princess has to pick a new dad from a lineup of emperors? That's wild, Kyle. It's their tradition. The queen needs a consort, and apparently the princess gets to choose who it'll be. And you'll be there? Actually seeing these emperor guys? Kyle nodded. Just cleaning the floors while history happens around me. But yeah, I'll be there. After ending the call, Kyle lay on his bed, thoughts whirling. He had come to Nexarus seeking something greater than his mundane life on Earth, and while being a janitor wasn't exactly the adventure he'd imagined, he had to admit there were moments, like tomorrow, when he felt like a witness to something extraordinary. The next morning arrived with a symphony of light as the three suns rose in sequence. Kyle reported to the royal reception hall before dawn, joining a small army of service staff preparing for the grand event. The hall had been transformed overnight, decorated with living crystals that hummed with energy and massive holographic displays showing the emblems of the 5 imperial houses. Stay along the walls, Thrix instructed the maintenance team. You are to be invisible unless needed. Any disruption during the ceremonies will result in immediate termination. Kyle nodded, understanding that termination in this context could mean more than losing his job. He took his position near a decorative column, polishing tool in hand, as the palace dignitaries began to arrive. Princess Lyra entered the hall with her mother, both dressed in ceremonial attire that seemed to capture and amplify the light around them. The princess appeared nervous but composed, her slender form moving with practiced grace as she took her place on a smaller throne beside the queen. A hush fell over the assembly as the royal herald announced the arrival of the first emperor. Presenting his imperial majesty, Emperor Drax of the Valkyrian Dominion, Lord of the Obsidian Worlds, conqueror of the 7th Quadrant. The doors slid open to reveal a towering figure in black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Emperor Drax strode into the hall with confidence bordering on arrogance, his 4 arms moving in perfect coordination as he offered the traditional greeting to the queen and princess. Kyle watched with fascination. The Valkyrians were known for their military prowess and expansionist policies. An alliance with them would certainly strengthen Nexarus' defenses, but at what cost to their independence? One by one, the remaining emperors were announced and entered the hall, each more impressive than the last. Emperor Zolan of the Arcadian Collective, with his translucent skin revealing the complex network of bioluminescent veins beneath. Emperor Thale of the Myconian Federation, whose cybernetic enhancements gleamed with each movement. Emperor Vex of the Cerulean Empire, accompanied by a cloud of microscopic drones that formed changing patterns around him. And finally, Emperor Kral of the Brentari Alliance, whose telekinetic abilities were demonstrated as he entered without touching the ground. Kyle tried to remain inconspicuous while stealing glances at the proceedings. The formal introductions gave way to a ceremonial feast where the emperors attempted to impress the princess with tales of their accomplishments and the advantages an alliance with their respective empires would bring. Princess Lyra listened politely but revealed little of her thoughts. Kyle noticed she seemed most uncomfortable when Emperor Drax spoke of conquest, and Emperor Thale discussed his plans to enhance the Nexarian population with Myconian technology. The princess appeared somewhat more engaged with Emperors Zolan and Vex, while Emperor Kral's telekinetic displays seemed to both fascinate and unsettle her. As the feast concluded, Queen Selene addressed the gathering. As tradition dictates, each candidate will have 1 full day to demonstrate why they would make the most suitable consort and co-ruler. Emperor Drax, you shall have tomorrow. The princess will observe and interact with you throughout the day. Emperor Drax bowed deeply, his black armor gleaming. I look forward to demonstrating the strength and protection the Valkyrian Dominion can provide to Nexara. The assembly dispersed, and Kyle was assigned to clean up after the feast. As he worked, he noticed Princess Lyra lingering behind, staring thoughtfully at the emblems of the 5 imperial houses still displayed on the holographic projectors. You seem troubled, Your Highness, said a voice, and Kyle realized it belonged to Lady Mira, the princess's closest advisor. 5 choices, yet I feel as though I have none, Lyra replied softly, unaware that Kyle could hear them from his position behind a column. Each emperor offers power, technology, or protection, but at what cost to our people, to our way of life? Lady Mira placed a comforting hand on the princess's shoulder. The choice is difficult, but necessary. Your mother cannot rule alone indefinitely, and without a strong alliance, Nexera becomes vulnerable to forces that would not seek permission before taking control. Lyra sighed. I know. I just wish. She trailed off, then straightened her posture. It doesn't matter what I wish. I have my duty. Kyle continued his work, careful not to make a sound. As the princess and her advisor left the hall, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. Despite her royal status and alien physiology, in that moment, she had seemed remarkably human, a young person burdened with responsibilities beyond her years. The following days proceeded according to plan. Each emperor had their designated day to impress the princess, and Kyle found himself assigned to various locations throughout the palace where he could observe parts of these interactions. Emperor Drax demonstrated Valkyrian battle techniques and outlined his plans to incorporate Nexarian forces into the larger Valkyrian military. Emperor Zolan shared the artistic and philosophical achievements of the Arcadian collective, emphasizing cultural exchange over military might. Emperor Thale showcased Myconian technology, including medical advancements that could extend Nexarian lifespans. Emperor Vex presented elaborate simulations demonstrating how Cerulean drone technology could revolutionize Nexarian infrastructure. Emperor Kral conducted a telekinetic performance that left the audience in awe, promising to teach these abilities to the next generation of Nexarians. Throughout it all, Kyle noticed that Princess Lyra maintained a diplomatic demeanor, asking insightful questions but revealing little of her personal preferences. The palace buzzed with speculation about which emperor would be chosen, with different factions among the Nexarian nobility lobbying for their preferred candidate. On the 5th day, after all emperors had their opportunity to make their case, Kyle was assigned to clean the royal gardens, a vast enclosed ecosystem containing flora from across the galaxy. He worked quietly, removing fallen leaves and petals from the pathways, when he heard soft footsteps approaching. Kyle looked up to see Princess Lyra walking alone, seemingly lost in thought. Protocol demanded he make himself scarce, but before he could retreat, she noticed him. You may continue your work, she said, her voice gentler than he had expected. I don't wish to disturb you. Kyle bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper etiquette when directly addressed by royalty. Thank you, Your Highness. I'll try not to get in your way. To his surprise, the princess smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features. You're human, aren't you? I haven't had much opportunity to speak with humans. Yes, Your Highness. Kyle Barrett, Maintenance Department. Lyra approached, studying him with curiosity. How long have you been on Nexera Prime, Kyle Barrett? 3 years, Your Highness. And do you find our world to your liking? Kyle hesitated, wanting to be truthful but diplomatic. It's beautiful and advanced in many ways Earth isn't. The architecture alone is worth the journey. The princess nodded, then gestured to a nearby bench. Would you mind if we spoke for a moment? I rarely get to hear perspectives from outside the nobility. Kyle glanced around nervously. I'm not sure if I'm allowed, Your Highness. There are protocols. I'm initiating the conversation, so protocol permits it, Lyra assured him. Please, I could use a brief respite from all the imperial posturing. Carefully setting aside his tools, Kyle sat at the far end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. It must be overwhelming, having to make such an important choice. Lyra's expression clouded. It is, especially when the choice doesn't just affect me, but billions of people across our empire. She looked at Kyle directly. May I ask you something personal, Kyle Barrett? Of course, Your Highness. If you had to choose one of the 5 emperors based on what you've observed, who would it be? Kyle felt a moment of panic. This was dangerous territory for a lowly maintenance worker. I'm not sure it's my place to have an opinion on such matters, Your Highness. Please, she insisted. I've heard nothing but carefully calculated political assessments for days. I'd value an outsider's honest impression. Taking a deep breath, Kyle considered the question. Well, I've only seen fragments of their presentations, but Emperor Zolan seemed the most interested in actual cooperation rather than domination. And Emperor Vex's technology could genuinely improve people's lives, though his drones are a bit unsettling. The princess nodded thoughtfully. And what of the others? Kyle hesitated, then decided that honesty had been requested. Emperor Drax seems to view Nexera as a strategic asset rather than a partner. Emperor Thal's cybernetic improvements sound more like he wants to remake your people in the Myconian image. And Emperor Krull, well, his abilities are impressive, but he appears more interested in inspiring awe than understanding Nexarian needs. Lyra studied Kyle with renewed interest. You're very perceptive for a maintenance worker. Kyle smiled slightly. Just because I clean floors doesn't mean I don't use my eyes and ears, Your Highness. Indeed. The princess was quiet for a moment, then asked, What did you do before coming to Nexera Prime? I ran a small technology repair business on Earth. It failed during the economic adjustments after first contact. Coming here was a fresh start, even if it meant starting at the bottom. And do you regret it? Starting over in a place where humans are still novelties. Working in a position that doesn't utilize your technical skills. Kyle considered the question carefully. Sometimes, but I've seen wonders here that few humans ever will. I've learned about cultures and technologies beyond anything I could have imagined on Earth. And there's a certain freedom in being underestimated. People reveal more when they think you're just part of the furniture. Princess Lyra laughed, a melodious sound that seemed to brighten the garden around them. A very diplomatic answer, Kyle Barrett. I've had 3 years of practice, Your Highness. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Mira, who appeared startled to find the princess conversing with a human maintenance worker. Your Highness, the council awaits your presence, Lady Mira announced, casting a suspicious glance at Kyle. Princess Lyra stood gracefully. Thank you for the conversation, Kyle Barrett. It was refreshingly honest. As she departed with Lady Mira, Kyle heard the advisor whisper, Your Highness, it's hardly appropriate to engage with service staff before such an important decision. On the contrary, Lyra replied, just loud enough for Kyle to hear. I found it most illuminating. Kyle resumed his work, troubled by the encounter. Had he said too much? Would his honest assessment of the emperors be reported, possibly costing him his position? He tried to push these worries aside and focus on his tasks, but found his thoughts returning to the princess and her impossible choice. The following day was the ceremony of selection, the culmination of the week-long proceedings where Princess Lyra would announce her choice. The entire palace was in a state of carefully controlled chaos as final preparations were made. Kyle had been assigned to the Great Hall early, ensuring every surface gleamed before the ceremony began. As dignitaries and representatives from across the Confederation arrived, Kyle positioned himself unobtrusively near a service entrance, curious to witness the historic moment. The 5 emperors entered together, each radiating confidence that they would be the chosen one. Queen Selene arrived to tremendous fanfare, taking her place on the central throne. A hush fell over the assembly as Princess Lyra entered, her ceremonial attire more elaborate than anything Kyle had seen before, with crystals that seemed to contain miniature galaxies woven into the fabric. The princess took her position before the throne, facing the 5 emperors and the gathered representatives of the Confederation. Today, Queen Selene announced, My daughter will choose the next king of Nexera, my consort, and a father figure to guide her as she prepares to one day assume the throne. This decision strengthens not only our royal line, but our empire's position within the Galactic Confederation. Princess Lyra stepped forward, her expression serene but determined. The 5 emperors moved to form a semicircle before her, each standing beside a crystalline pillar representing their empire. I have considered each candidate carefully, Lyra began, her voice clear and strong despite the pressure of the moment. Each emperor offers unique strengths and advantages to an alliance with Nexera. I have reflected on what would best serve our people, our traditions, and our future. The tension in the hall was palpable as everyone waited for her to approach one of the 5 emperors, as tradition dictated. Instead, Princess Lyra turned to face her mother. "Mother, before I make my selection, I would like to propose an alternative." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not part of the ceremony. Queen Selene appeared momentarily startled, but quickly composed herself. "The ancient laws permit you to speak before your selection, daughter. What alternative do you wish to propose?" Lyra's voice remained steady as she addressed not just her mother, but the entire assembly. The tradition of selection was established in a time when our empire needed immediate protection and alliance through marriage. Today, Nexera stands as one of the founding members of the Confederation. We have strength of our own. The 5 emperors exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by this unexpected turn. "I propose that instead of choosing a king based on imperial power or military might, we consider what qualities would truly benefit our people. Wisdom, compassion, understanding, the ability to see value in all beings, regardless of their origin or status." Kyle felt a strange tension in his chest as Princess Lyra's gaze swept across the hall, momentarily passing over his position by the service entrance. "The law requires I choose someone to serve as my father figure and advisor as I continue my preparation to one day rule. It does not, however, specify that this person must be one of the 5 presented candidates." Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the hall. Queen Selene leaned forward on her throne, her expression unreadable. "Daughter, what are you suggesting?" Princess Lyra stood taller, her conviction evident. "I have made my selection, mother, but it is not one of the 5 emperors." Emperor Drax stepped forward, his imposing figure radiating controlled anger. "This is an outrage. The selection ceremony has clear protocols that have been observed for millennia. The protocols state that the princess must choose a worthy guide." Queen Selene corrected, raising a hand to silence the Valkyrian emperor. "They do not, as my daughter correctly notes, limit her choice to the presented candidates." The queen turned to her daughter. "Who, then, do you choose, Lyra?" The princess took a deep breath. "I choose someone who has demonstrated wisdom without arrogance, who observes and understands without seeking to dominate, who appreciates our culture while bringing fresh perspective." Kyle felt his heart rate accelerating as Princess Lyra's next words echoed through the great hall. "I choose Kyle Barrett of Earth." The hall erupted in chaos. Nobles gasped in shock, the 5 emperors protested loudly, and security personnel moved into defensive positions, uncertain of what was happening. Kyle stood frozen in place, convinced he had misheard or that this was some elaborate prank at his expense. Queen Selene raised her hands, and a wave of energy pulsed through the hall, immediately silencing the uproar. "Approach, Kyle Barrett of Earth," she commanded, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. On legs that felt disconnected from his body, Kyle stepped forward, acutely aware of every eye in the hall following his progress. He was still wearing his maintenance uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate attire of everyone else present. As he reached the center of the hall, standing before the royal throne, Princess Lyra moved to his side. "Your Highness," Kyle whispered urgently, "there must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," she replied firmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You showed me something none of these emperors did, the ability to see people as they are, not as assets or resources." Queen Selene studied Kyle with penetrating intensity. "Daughter, explain your choice to the assembly." Princess Lyra turned to address the hall. "In my conversations with the 5 emperors, each spoke of what they could give Nexera: protection, technology, cultural exchange, but always with the understanding that we would be the lesser partner in the alliance, dependent on their generosity and goodwill." She gestured to Kyle. "This human sees the galaxy differently. He came to our world not to conquer or control, but to learn and contribute, however humbly. In a brief conversation, He demonstrated more insight into the true needs of our people than any of the emperors managed in their full day of presentation. Emperor Zolan stepped forward, his translucent features pulsing with emotion. This is unprecedented, Your Highness. A human maintenance worker as royal consort? The diplomatic implications alone. I have not chosen him as royal consort, Princess Lyra interrupted smoothly. The law distinguishes between the role of king consort to the queen and the role of father advisor to the princess. I have chosen Kyle Barrett for the latter role only. Kyle's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Your Highness, I'm not qualified for this position. I don't understand your politics, your traditions. That, said Queen Selene, may be precisely why my daughter has chosen you. The queen rose from her throne, commanding everyone's attention. The selection is the princess's right by law. If she has found qualities in this human that she values over imperial power, then perhaps we should consider what that reveals about our assumptions. The 5 emperors conferred among themselves, clearly displeased but unwilling to directly challenge Nexarian sovereignty in such a public forum. This is highly irregular, Emperor Drax finally stated, but we acknowledge the princess's right to choose. However, we must insist that formal alliances between our empires be negotiated separately from this personal appointment. Queen Selene nodded. That is acceptable. Diplomatic channels remain open to all 5 imperial houses. She turned to Kyle. Kyle Barrett of Earth, do you accept the position offered to you by Princess Lyra? To serve as her father advisor until she ascends to the throne? Kyle looked at Princess Lyra, whose expression held something he hadn't seen during the entire ceremony. Hope. I accept, Your Majesty, he heard himself say, though I request patience as I learn what this role entails. A wise first statement. Queen Selene observed with what might have been the ghost of a smile. The ceremony is concluded. Let the record show that Princess Lyra of Nexara has selected Kyle Barrett of Earth as her father advisor. The announcement triggered another wave of murmurs throughout the hall, but Queen Selene's authoritative presence prevented any further outbursts. The 5 emperors departed with varying degrees of diplomatic grace, while palace officials hurried to adjust protocols for this unexpected outcome. As the assembly dispersed, Kyle found himself ushered into a small antechamber with Queen Selene and Princess Lyra. Away from the public eye, the queen's regal demeanor softened slightly. You have created quite the diplomatic situation, daughter, she said, though her tone held more amusement than reproach. I chose what I believe is best for Nexara, Lyra replied. We need new perspectives, not more of the same power games that have dominated Confederation politics for centuries. The queen turned her attention to Kyle, who stood awkwardly in his maintenance uniform, still struggling to comprehend the day's events. Kyle Barrett, I suspect you have many questions. Too many to count, Your Majesty, Kyle admitted. I'm still not entirely convinced this isn't some elaborate practical joke. Queen Selene's expression remained serious. I assure you, this is no joke. The position of father advisor is a sacred trust in our culture. While you will not have political authority in the broader empire, your influence on my daughter's development will shape Nexara's future leadership. Kyle took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. With all due respect, Your Majesty, why would you allow this? Surely there are more qualified candidates than a human janitor. The selection is the princess's right alone, Queen Selene replied. However, I have observed you these past 3 years, Kyle Barrett. You work diligently without complaint. You learn our ways without presuming to change them. You watch and listen more than you speak. She exchanged a glance with her daughter. These are not such terrible qualities in an advisor. But the 5 emperors, Kyle began, will be disappointed and possibly insulted, the queen finished for him. Diplomatic challenges we have faced before and will face again. Nexara remains strong enough that they cannot afford to sever ties completely. Princess Lyra stepped closer to Kyle. When we spoke in the garden, you showed me that wisdom can come from unexpected places. You assessed the emperors more accurately in glimpses than I did after full days of interaction. I just said what I observed, Kyle replied, still uncomfortable with the praise. Exactly, Lyra said with a smile. No agenda, no attempt to manipulate the outcome for personal gain. Just honest observation and insight. She turned to her mother. Isn't that what I need most as I prepare to rule? Someone who will tell me the truth, not what they think will advance their position. Queen Selene nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps, though this truth-teller will need considerable education in Nexarian law, history, and protocol if he is to advise you effectively. I'm a quick study, Kyle offered, beginning to accept that this was actually happening. But I have one condition. Both royal women looked at him with surprise. Apparently, humans given unprecedented positions weren't expected to make demands. I'd like to contact my sister on Earth. She's the only family I have left, and if I'm taking on this role, I want her to understand what's happening. The Queen and Princess exchanged glances, and then Queen Selene nodded. A reasonable request. We will arrange for secure communication, and if you wish, transportation for your sister to join you on Nexera Prime. Thank you, Your Majesty, Kyle said, genuinely moved by the offer. Your living quarters will need to be relocated to the royal wing. The Queen continued, practical details replacing the earlier tension. And of course, appropriate attire will be provided. The royal tailor will attend to you immediately. As arrangements were being discussed, a thought occurred to Kyle. What about my position in maintenance? Who will cover my duties? Princess Lyra laughed, that same melodious sound he had heard in the garden. I believe we can find another janitor, called Barrett, though perhaps not one as observant as you. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Kyle. He moved from his modest staff quarters to a suite in the royal wing that was larger than his entire apartment back on Earth. His maintenance uniform was replaced by clothing that incorporated both Nexarian styles and subtle Earth influences, a symbolic representation of his unique position. Most challenging was his crash course in Nexarian history, law, and protocol. Kyle spent hours each day with tutors, absorbing centuries of information that most Nexarians learned throughout their much longer lifespans. The workload was intense, but Kyle approached it with the same determination that had brought him to this alien world in the first place. His sister Emma arrived on Nexera Prime a month after the ceremony, her journey expedited by royal decree. Their reunion in Kyle's new quarters was emotional. When you said you were moving up in your last message, I thought maybe you'd been promoted to head janitor, Emma said, looking around the opulent room with wide eyes. Not, whatever this is. Father advisor to the princess, Kyle supplied, still finding the title strange on his tongue. Believe me, no one's more surprised than I am. Emma hugged her brother tightly. Mom and Dad would be so proud. Well, after they got over the shock of you becoming alien royalty. I'm not royalty, Kyle corrected. More like an officially appointed mentor. To a princess. On another planet. After she rejected 5 actual emperors. Emma shook her head in amazement. Only you, Kyle. As Emma settled into guest quarters, Kyle continued his education while beginning his advisory duties. Princess Lyra sought his input on various matters, particularly those involving relations with other species in the Confederation. Kyle's outsider perspective offered insights that centuries of tradition sometimes obscured. 3 months after the selection ceremony, Kyle attended his first Confederation Council meeting alongside Princess Lyra. The 5 rejected emperors were present, and while diplomatic protocol was maintained, Kyle could feel their scrutiny and, in some cases, resentment. They're still trying to figure out what special powers or resources you must possess, Princess Lyra whispered as they took their seats. They cannot fathom that I might value perspective over power. The council meeting addressed trade disputes, security concerns, and cultural exchange programs, all topics Kyle had been studying intensively. When discussion turned to integration of newer Confederation members, including several human colonies, Kyle found himself invited to speak. Standing before representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, Kyle Barrett, former Earth businessman and palace janitor, offered insights on how the transition to galactic citizenship felt from a human perspective. He spoke honestly about the challenges of adapting to different technologies, physiologies, and cultural expectations, suggesting ways the Confederation might ease these transitions for future member species. To his surprise, his comments were met with thoughtful consideration rather than dismissal. Even Emperor Zolan acknowledged the value of hearing directly from someone who had experienced these challenges firsthand. As the meeting concluded, Queen Selene approached Kyle. "You represented Nexera well today," she said simply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I tried to be honest while respecting the complexities of the situation." The Queen studied him with her penetrating gaze. "My daughter chose wisely, I think. You bring something to our court that has been lacking, a genuine desire to understand rather than control." Kyle bowed respectfully. "I'm still learning, Your Majesty." "As are we all," the Queen replied. "Some of us have simply forgotten that fact after too many centuries of believing we have all the answers." As months turned into a year, Kyle settled into his role as father advisor. His relationship with Princess Lyra evolved into one of mutual respect and genuine friendship. He taught her about human perspectives and adaptability, while she guided him through the intricacies of Nexarian politics and traditions. Emma decided to stay on Nexera Prime, accepting a position in the Cultural Exchange Program where her experience as a human adapting to Nexarian society proved invaluable. The siblings often discussed how differently their lives had turned out than they had imagined after their parents' deaths and Kyle's business failure. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Emma asked during one of their weekly dinners. Kyle considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. The smell of rain on hot pavement. The way the moon looks on a clear night." He gazed out the window at the 3 moons of Nexera Prime, each a different color casting multicolored light across the crystalline cityscape. "But I found something here I don't think I would have found on Earth." "A royal title?" Emma teased. Kyle shook his head. "Purpose. The feeling that what I do matters. Not just to me or even just to Lyra, but potentially to billions of beings across multiple worlds." He smiled at his sister. "That's worth adapting to 3 suns and higher gravity." On the first anniversary of the selection ceremony, a formal celebration was held to commemorate Princess Lyra's unconventional but increasingly respected choice. The 5 emperors attended, their initial offense tempered by a year of observing how Kyle's influence had actually strengthened Nexera's position within the Confederation rather than weakened it. During the celebration, Princess Lyra requested Kyle join her on one of the palace's many balconies, away from the crowds. The capital city stretched below them, its architecture a blend of ancient tradition and cutting-edge technology, much like Nexera itself. "Are you enjoying this celebration, Kyle Barrett?" the princess asked, using his full name as she often did when feeling reflective. "It's certainly grand," Kyle replied, "though I still feel somewhat out of place at these formal events." Even after a year of intensive cultural training, Kyle smiled. "Some things can't be taught, I think. The inherent comfort that comes from being born into a tradition rather than adopted into it." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why your perspective remains so valuable. You see both as an insider and outsider simultaneously." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights twinkle beneath them. "Do you ever regret your choice?" Kyle finally asked, a question that had lingered in his mind throughout the year. Princess Lyra turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Not for a moment. You have helped me see our empire and my future role in it with fresh eyes. The 5 emperors offered resources and power, but you offered wisdom and perspective." She smiled. "One cannot put a value on genuine guidance given without personal agenda." "I still clean my own quarters, you know," Kyle admitted with a grin. "The royal housekeeping staff thinks I'm peculiar." "Old habits from your janitorial days?" "Partly, but it also helps me remember where I started. Keeps me grounded when all of this." He gestured to the opulent surroundings, "starts to feel normal." Princess Lyra's expression grew serious. "In 50 years, I will ascend to the throne. You will have completed your role as father advisor, having prepared me to rule. What then, Kyle Barrett? Will you return to Earth?" Kyle hadn't thought that far ahead. Humans rarely planned on the timescales that Nexarians did. "I don't know. Earth has changed since I left. And I've changed too." "Then perhaps you will consider staying," Lyra suggested. not as my advisor, but as Nexra's ambassador to Earth and the human colonies. Someone who truly understands both worlds. The idea resonated with something Kyle had been feeling but hadn't articulated, a sense that his journey had purpose beyond his current role. I would be honored to serve in that capacity, Your Highness. As they returned to the celebration, Kyle reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. From failed businessman to alien janitor to royal advisor to potential future ambassador, none of it could have been predicted or planned. Emperor Drax approached them as they re-entered the hall, his imposing figure still intimidating despite the year of diplomatic interactions. Human, he acknowledged Kyle with the barest minimum of respect before turning to Princess Lyra. Your Highness, your choice continues to puzzle the Confederation, yet I must admit Nexra appears to be thriving under this unconventional arrangement. Sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from unexpected sources, Emperor Drax, Lyra replied diplomatically. Perhaps there is wisdom in looking beyond traditional power structures occasionally. The Valkyrian Emperor's expression suggested he remained unconvinced, but he offered a formal bow before moving away. He still thinks I must have some secret technology or genetic enhancement that explains your choice, Kyle observed quietly. Let him wonder, Princess Lyra said with a smile. Perhaps it will encourage him to look more closely at the qualities he values in his own advisors. As the celebration continued around them, Kyle found himself thinking about the random circumstances that had led him to Nexra Prime. A failed business, a desire for adventure, a maintenance position that no one else wanted. Small choices that had culminated in a profound change not just for him, but potentially for relations between humans and the wider galactic community. The human janitor who became father advisor to an alien princess. It sounded like the beginning of a fairy tale, yet here he was, living it. Whatever came next, and with decades of service ahead, much would certainly come. Kyle knew that sometimes the most important qualification wasn't power, technology, or imperial lineage, but simply the ability to see clearly and speak honestly. In a galaxy of emperors competing for influence, sometimes what a princess needed most was simply a fresh perspective, even if it came from the most unlikely source imaginable. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.